Welcome back, friends, to another live edition of In the Trenches. Let you know what's going on MGO Blue Podcast. We've got editions out. We have them out all week. You guys are very familiar. Now that we're in mid-season, you should know almost every single day we have something, whether it's on In the Trenches, Defend the Block, Conquering Heroes, something all week long to let you know what's going on in Defend the Block. Already out, men's basketball assistant coach Kyle Church with my partner Brian Boesch, Conquering Heroes. Brandon Lociavo, diving coach here at the University of Michigan, joins us this week. And in the trenches, we've got our Keys to the Game edition, which will come out on Thursday. And there might be, this is always the Nebraska week, and it's always a little something special in that, locker room speech that I give. So make sure you tune into that one. And then, as we all know, post-game edition from Lincoln, Nebraska, as all of the children are weeping, leaving Memorial Stadium. Brian and I will find a way to put together the victorious post-game edition of In the Trenches.
What's going on, John?
Not much.
So for those who have consumed that Thursday audio-only version where John gives his keys to the game, we have the radio network scene setter a little bit early for you to preview, and then, of course, John's locker room speech. How this developed was just at the end of, we used to have just the one episode during the week and then the post-game episode, and John would just start, like, as his close to the show, he would simply just start getting really excited, really animated about the game ahead. And the best part of how it organically came about, and you did this for a little while, do you remember what you did with the opposing head coach?
I did. I think I mentioned something about their significant other.
No, I think I would have tried to cut that one out. What you did do is you would say, for example, one of the first you did was Notre Dame. So you would say, "Oh, those Notre Dame fans, little Brian and little Kelly."
Oh yes. I use kids' names. Yes, yeah.
Little James, little Franklin.
Yeah. I've been hit in the head a couple of times, so I forget. I know it wasn't that long ago, but
I don't remember the significant other thing. That's. Maybe we shouldn't remember the significant other.
I don't know. Don't go back in any of those post-game editions. Those will be taken down by the time we're off.
Yeah, it's just, we're just learning and growing this into 500-plus episodes. A little Rule would be a little challenging this week, but you would have pulled it off.
Yeah, Little Rule.
RHULE.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. There's always something special there, and it's kind of breaking my heart that I can't talk about Scott Frost anymore. He did nothing in Lincoln, so there's really not much to talk about there. So he's no longer there. He's now working towards another national title down at, was it UCF?
Yes.
So we'll see what he does down there. But we are here talking about Michigan football and our trip to Lincoln, Nebraska, and there needs to be some improvements from our last road trip to this road trip.
Yeah, so let's get into it on our 7 from 77, starting with just kind of a status update for both of Michigan's primary units. We'll go with the offensive side first. Definitely a lot to like against Central Michigan on Saturday, but John, where do you feel like this offense stands right now after the 3-game non-conference slate?
I like what they're doing with Bryce Underwood. I like what they're doing with the passing game. I've seen really nice developments with whether it's Channing Goodwin, Andrew Marsh. We saw him catch his first ball last week. And there's some of these guys are really starting to run good routes. And I like the fact that Bryce is starting to trust them. We saw the kind of the 50-50 ball he threw up to Hogan Hansen. He comes down with it. We saw it against Oklahoma with Donovan McCulley. That is a really nice development. And the touchdown pass to Samaj, I really liked that one because it reminded me of some throws that he tried to make in the Oklahoma game, and he was under a little bit of pressure. Evan Link had given up a little bit of ground, knows that the pocket is closing up, knows where his receiver is supposed to go, and he puts a little touch on the ball, throws it to where the receiver is supposed to be, and Samaj sees it, runs to where the ball is going, and it's a touchdown. I thought that showed really nice growth from the quarterback position. So I like where they're going from there. The running game is always going to be a part of this offense. We saw it be very productive with Bryce as a runner, and we've seen it be productive, obviously with just the running backs. Where this team needs to improve is the offensive side, is consistency by the way the offensive line plays. New Mexico, Central Michigan, you should dominate up front, and they eventually did. But Oklahoma, it was all about movement up front. And they did a little bit better against Central Michigan, but you're blocking a different caliber of individual. It's about trusting your technique. It's about performing and excelling in those techniques. This will be that next step because Nebraska's going to move up front. They're a little bit undersized, and we'll get to some of that more a little bit later in the program. But that's where this team needs to be more consistent, is getting movement up front and in pass protection as well.
So it seemed like from Biff Poggi on Monday, both on the radio show, which you can hear on the audio podcast side, or also in his press conference with the media. We'll get the official word Saturday, but doesn't look good for Giovanni El-Hadi playing this week. Brady Norton could be someone who gets a chance to play after missing the Central Michigan game. Do you anticipate any changes to that offensive line, the two guards, which had to be a little fluid last week because of no Gio and no Brady?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jake Guarnero went in there and played well. I think we'll see him as a part of that rotation. If Gio's not there, I think Nathan Afobe stays at that left guard spot. Maybe we see more of that extra tight end. I mean, against Central Michigan, they came out first snap. It was Blake Frazier at the tight end position. So extra offensive lineman. I think we see a lot more of that getting into Big Ten play and getting this running game going. And then we'll see what happens at that left guard spot. If Brady Norton can go, if it's going to be Jake, whoever is going to fill in there. So I don't expect tremendous movement up front. But the one thing, going back to what I liked about this, and if you haven't heard it yet, go back and listen to the first couple of segments of the coaches show, because Biff did talk about what is going to be on the table for this offense. And he said, we're not holding anything back. The entire playbook is open. That excites me, not just for Bryce, but it really excites me for Chip Lindsey. Now we get a chance. We saw a lot of that playbook against Central Michigan. We saw what it can look like, attacking the edges, the middle of the field, deep, short, all of that different stuff. Now we're going to get a chance to see what the entirety of this offense can be by play caller, also by quarterback and talent.
I appreciated Chip Lindsey's honesty after Oklahoma leading up to Central Michigan, explaining kind of why he held back a little bit and played more conservatively, but also admitted, yeah, we probably should have done things a little bit differently. All right, number 2 on our 7 from 77. Let's do the defense now. Strengths, weaknesses after non-conference play.
Well, I'm going to give you a couple of strengths, and I like the variety with which Wink is calling the defenses. We saw against Central Michigan, Jayshawn Barham play on the edge, which, it really freed up a lot of that defense. We saw how effective he could be. I mean, it was snap one. All of a sudden, he's after the quarterback. In the run game, it was the same thing. His penetration of the field really eliminated anything that was going to try and get outside on the field, because they were playing him to the field. And his ability to retrace his steps and make a play at the line of scrimmage as well. So he was making plays in the run game, in the pass game. Obviously we know he can drop, but it's what that allows Derek Moore, Cam Brandt, a lot of those other guys to do and be opposite him, because Nebraska's going to look at that and say, okay, if they line up number 1 on the edge, we're going to have to slide our protections to him. We're going to have to give that tackle a little bit of assistance, or we're going to have to send a tight end over there. We're going to have to send a running back, and it's going to leave a lot of guys one-on-one, or they're not going to be able to send as many guys downfield in pass routes. So that's the one thing that I like, and it's kind of piggybacking off of that. And so a lot of the things that we said preseason are coming true. Talent in the secondary is all very young. And you're going to see some great moments. You're also going to see some moments where you're like, what the hell were you thinking? But they've got tremendous talent. But it's the linebackers. Cole Sullivan, Jimmy Rolder, Ernie Hausman. Like those 3 guys, along with Jayshawn, it is the most talented group in all of college football at the linebacker position. To me, it's not even close. They're allowed to use Jayshawn because of the way that Jimmy and Cole have progressed. What they're able to do. You knew Ernie was going to be one of that part of that equation, but to have those other 2 guys really allows Wink to be very creative in the fronts that he puts out there, whether going 5 bigs with Jayshawn on the edge, or you're going to go 4, and it allows him a lot of options to create chaos on that offensive line, and we saw it in the game. A couple of the Jansen visions that I showed on Sunday morning show. You got unblocked defenders coming straight at your quarterback because they don't know which way and who's coming, where they're coming from. It's going to be really interesting as this defense becomes more comfortable, and Wink as well with what they excel at, calling more of that and confusing offensive lines.
We will continue our 7 from 77 here momentarily, but if you're coming out to Ann Arbor to support your Wolverines this year, we encourage you to hang out in Ann Arbor for more than just the game.
Yeah, and I mean, you can always stop at your favorite spot, but if you're trying something new, here's some options for you. You can hit up the downtown social district, the Arboretum, one of my favorite places from when I was in college, even to now, a concert. There's so many different options. There's a lot to do outside of Ann Arbor as well, such as hiking the B2B trail and golfing on some incredible courses. That's because the Ann Arbor area is 7 destinations full of year-round fun and plenty of fans rooting for the Maize and Blue. Can't argue with any of those stats. Start planning your trip now at annarbor.org.
All right, number 3 on our 7 from 77. Obviously, no Sherrone Moore at all this week, which is a unique challenge, and it's different than this past week because Sherrone was able to be around the building until 11:59 on Friday. So your impressions, first from a player standpoint, how the Wolverines prepared last week and how ready they are to tackle a week of preparation with no contact with Coach Moore.
Well, it's not going to change a lot for the players. Sure, when you walk into a full team meeting, it's going to be Biff or it's going to be one of the coordinators talking and not Sherrone. You know, Sherrone is the one that's going to set the tone for the week. He did all he could up until late Friday night, talking to the team at the hotel before he was unable to be with the team until after the Nebraska game. So that's going to be a little bit of a difference. But when they're in their meetings with their position coaches, Sherrone's not generally in a lot of those meetings. He may pop his head in. He may just stop in to say a few comments. But there's not going to be a lot of difference. It's really going to be more on the coach's side of things where game plan preparation, when you're watching film and you dig even deeper. And I know Sherrone, when we talked to him last week, he was going to be doing double duty. He was going to be putting together game plans, things that he saw, things that he wanted to see this offense, this defense do, things he wanted from his coaches. So he put that out there, and Biff talked about it in the postgame. Hey, there's a specific plan, and all he is doing is following that plan. But you've got very experienced coaches in coordinators. Wink Martindale's been around football a long time. He's going to be able to make his adjustments, do what he has to do. Same thing with Chip Lindsey. And so there are things that happened in that Central Michigan game that we didn't know about until we saw him on film. Sherrone is in conversations as this offense and this team continues to grow and build on what they did against Central Michigan, now against Nebraska.
All right, number 4 on our 7 from 77. How about the staff standpoint? You had Coach Poggi, obviously, on the Monday radio show. We saw Biff operate for one game. This is a different beast, though. On the road at Nebraska, how ready is he and the staff for this challenge?
Oh, I mean, I think they're all ready to go. And like I talked about, there's experience on this staff. Even the other assistant coaches, whether you're talking about Grant Newsom, not his first year, Ron Bellamy, not his first year, Lamar Morgan, like you go on both sides of the ball, there's a lot of experience. And I'm not trying to discount what Sherrone does, but for a week's time, you can rely on those guys to follow a plan, to install a plan. And I think the biggest thing for me is going to be in-game calls. We saw that from Biff last week where he calls a timeout just prior to the 2-minute timeout, and knowing that he wanted to put Bryce and this offense in a 2-minute drive or a 2-minute drill situation. They're able to get the stop, they're able to get the ball back, and now all of a sudden, hey, one of the great things that we learned was Bryce's ability to operate the offense, no huddle, making calls at the line of scrimmage, getting the ball outside, receivers getting out of bounds, him picking up first downs, getting out of bounds, all of those things, but it was set up by clock management. Now it's going to become more important when you get on the road, and we've learned this with a number of trips to Lincoln. It may come down to that last few minutes of the game, and if it does, I do think that Biff is in a position to make the right decisions on when and where and how to use timeouts. Chip is going to be the one calling the plays, getting them into Bryce, and that's going to allow them to operate in those moments with high efficiency.
So number 5 on our 7 from 77, and thanks to those dealing with the audio issues, think we got it figured out here. John, give us your initial thoughts on Nebraska. We'll get your keys on Thursday's audio edition, but what do you think about a Huskers team that went to a neutral site in Kansas City and won week 1 over Cincinnati and then picked up 2 pretty handy wins over non-power conference foes in weeks 2 and 3?
So obviously offensively, it starts with Dylan Raiola. He's a quarterback that still has a lot to prove. He's very talented. Started off fast last year, tapered off towards the end of the year. There were some turnover issues, and how much work has he done? We don't really know about it was Cincinnati, all right, good win. Akron, decent win. Houston Christian, okay, we have no idea necessarily what this team is other than what we've seen on film. He's very talented and can put the ball downfield. The one thing that I have recognized is they've got some speed at receiver. They don't run the ball necessarily like a traditional Nebraska team would run the ball, but when we're talking traditional Nebraska teams, we're talking back in the 90s, so I'm not sure if that's a tradition anymore. And then the black shirts on defense. I don't know what they're going to do. I know that there is still that there. The one thing I do notice about the defense is, and I don't want to say they're smaller, but they're leaner on defense. Most of their defensive linemen, even their tackles, are sub 300. So what that means to me is they're not going to stand in one place. They've watched the Oklahoma film. They're not going to stand in one place and let Michigan's big offensive line and lean on them and try and get underneath them. There's going to be a lot of movement up front. You'll probably see a lot of 5 down. You might see some bare front, but it's all going to contain movement at the snap of the ball. So that'll be a challenge for Michigan. Are you going to be better in Lincoln on the road? Is your communication going to be what it needs to be? And that's something else I think this offense needs to do. I know we talked a little bit about that. We'll talk more about it in the keys, is get to the line of scrimmage. Allow your quarterback the time. If you're going to huddle up, which Michigan has done a little bit this year, break the huddle at 16 or 17. Don't wait for 13. You get to the line, offensive line puts their hand in the ground, and all of a sudden, if you have to make an adjustment, it's hurried. Calls are going to be hurried. Get there, break the huddle at 16, 17. If you're going to call the play from the line of scrimmage, do it at that time so that you can make adjustments, and then it's much easier, it's much calmer environment, so control the tempo of the game.
It was interesting what Biff said during Monday's radio show. He does not want people around the building. He hopes that nobody outside the building will refer to Bryce Underwood as a freshman anymore. If that's the case, then there's belief that one road game, one hostile environment is enough for Bryce to get used to that unique format. Do you think he's ready for Lincoln, which is, to me, every bit the atmosphere of Norman, and Norman was a tremendous atmosphere?
It was, and so it's a valuable experience, but it's only his second time. Yeah. So I'm not expecting him to have the seasoning of a quarterback that's been, to the Horseshoe or has been to a number of different, Big Ten locations, whether it's Norman, in the early season, Lincoln, like there's a number of really big time venues, Happy Valley. So yeah, you have that experience, but every time you go out there, there's something new, there's something different. And he needs to grow from that first one, but so does everyone else. And I also somewhat disagree with Biff, and I understand the concept of, hey, don't talk about him as a freshman. He's mentally tough enough to overcome the label of being a freshman, because he is a freshman. So I don't think it's surprising to him that people would call him a freshman. But the mindset needs to be, okay, we're past that. And normally you give some of these younger players, like receivers, we're starting to see Andrew Marsh come on a little bit. Yeah. I think by the time we get to week 7 or 8, we see him a lot more a part of the offense and maybe a focal point of the offense. But Bryce just doesn't have that luxury. He's got to be that guy now.
There's a couple of high-profile freshmen on defense, too, right? Yep. Jaden Sanders, Elijah Dotson getting some more run as secondary depth pieces will be really interesting. And, again, encourage folks to check out Thursday's audio edition of In the Trenches, as John will give you his keys to the game. Before we get into some of the other Big Ten and national storylines, folks, did you know that your favorite craft brewery is also a proud partner of Michigan Athletics?
Well, Brian, if they didn't, they will now, because Founders Brewing Company has been making high-quality beers, highly rated beers, like All Day IPA, Michigan Pilsner, and their new Mortal Bloom right here in the great state of Michigan for over 25 years. As a proud sponsor of Michigan Athletics, they're here to help you celebrate every Wolverine win with the perfect beer in hand. Whether you're at a game, tailgating, or watching from home, there's nothing like enjoying a Michigan-made beer from Founders. You can learn more about their community involvement and where to find your go-to game day beer at foundersbrewing.com.
All right, number 6 on our 7 from 77. Let's talk a little bit about what we saw in the Big Ten. All the ranked teams rolled. How about this stat? Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana combined to win 297 to 32. I want you to rank the most impressive from 1 to... I don't want you to actually do that.
Hold on. Wake me up when it's done. I'm just glad that we're now into conference games. And I know we had a conference game in, Oregon and Northwestern. That was not a great game either, and especially if you had to sit there and wait through it.
Yes, and also USC and Purdue, which they had to sit and wait through a pretty healthy rain delay before that game.
That one was almost 3.5 hours long.
That is. And we all know about the Purdue visiting locker room is not exactly the most spacious and air-conditioned filled. Yes, not ideal. The losses for the league, Luke Fickell and the Badgers go to Alabama, lose 38-14. Minnesota falls late Saturday night at Cal. And then UCLA, 35-10, they lose to the New Mexico team we saw in week 1. That was the end for Deshaun Foster. He was let go as UCLA's head coach. And also, again, the 2 Big Ten games. We talked about USC and Oregon coming into the central time zone for Oregon. Purdue is in the eastern time zone and get wins. Thoughts on anything you saw last week, whether it was the big boys or some of these losses that stood out to you?
I mean, the Wisconsin loss, Billy Edwards, their quarterback, has been hurt. I know that they're hoping to get him back this week at latest, maybe next week. It's been a rough go for quarterbacks in Madison. The same thing happened last year. New offensive coordinator this year. You had a veteran quarterback. You're hoping for more. I just don't understand the struggles of, and maybe this is what some of what we witnessed here at Michigan, where you completely deviate from what your character is as a program, trying to get back to it. They went with the air raid, now trying to develop offensive linemen, trying to develop a running game. It takes time, and so there maybe not as much time as it used to with the transfer portal. They're just not getting there, and I'm just surprised it's taking Luke Fickell this long, or he's had this many struggles.
Yeah, it's a great point about Wisconsin, because there were several instances where Wisconsin was right there on the door of getting into the 4-team playoff. You wonder if they would have not necessarily shifted as far in a different direction had it been a 12-team playoff for those years and they got in and maybe won a game or two and made that run. But when you are close but not in, it sometimes makes you decide on some things that aren't at the core of what Wisconsin football is supposed to be.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of people on the west side of the state that are somewhat upset about the performance of their team. They are 3-0, and Aiden Childs, it took him till the 3rd game to throw his first interception. He's been very good, and I know, the transitive properties, we always talk about those, and Michigan State, they beat Boston College. Aiden Childs threw 4 touchdowns, the 2-point conversion in double overtime to win it. It was a great performance, but then that BC team that they beat goes and loses to Stanford.
Yeah.
All right, so you're trying to gauge the quality of some of these wins, but I will say this. I think Michigan State is a better team than I originally thought, and that's because if you have a quarterback that is a dual-threat quarterback, we're obviously very excited about it here in Ann Arbor. Aiden Childs, if he can be that guy that throws the ball, he was also their leading rusher against Youngstown State, that's a threat. You're a threat in any game. And so it'll be interesting to see how they do, because they've got that late game this weekend against USC.
Yeah, I was about to say, Aiden Childs is unlikely to throw an interception Saturday. He's more likely to throw an interception Sunday, especially if Michigan State defers to the second half. Yes. 11 o'clock Eastern, and I'm guessing there's going to be a slide. For those who aren't aware, TV networks can bump the kickoff back 5 minutes to what is actually scheduled. It's probably not 11 on the dot, probably like 11:05 or 11:10. It's brutal. I do feel, because I would not want a favorite team of mine to have to play at 11 o'clock in my time zone. That's just insane.
Not a favorite team. So.
Oh, I understand. So other games of note, Iowa at Rutgers on Friday. That's an intriguing one just for kind of the middle of the Big Ten. Those are games that teams like Iowa and Rutgers need to win if they want to exceed expectations in a given season. Rivalry week for Pacific Northwest schools. And boy, we kind of figured it was going to be tough for the Pac-2, Oregon State and Washington State, after basically the rest of the league left. Oregon State's 0-3. And Washington State is 2-1. But don't look too much into that because they lost 59-10.
Yeah, but they were on the road.
Hey, you don't go to Denton, Texas and expect to get out of a win all that often. North Texas, 59-10. Expect those to be likely blowouts, even if it's a rivalry game with those two.
I would think so. But the other game that we need to talk about is we're going to learn a lot about Indiana and Illinois.
Yes.
And it's Illinois going to Indiana, going to Bloomington. Indiana right now, it's hard to tell how good they are this year. We saw what they did last year.
The Indiana State game didn't give you a lot of...
No, it didn't really give me a lot to work off of. Yeah. But, what I did learn about Indiana, obviously they can still score points. Kirk Cignetti's offense is one that's designed to score a lot of points. Defensively, I'm not sure that they are the same team that they were last year. They don't have as much size, as much beef up front. They're not getting the penetration up front that they were getting last year. But the question is going to be, is Illinois for real? Mm-hmm. And it was a Duke that they played against. Yep, I was shocked the amount of pressure that Duke got on Illinois and their quarterback, Drew Altmaier, in the first half. Now, they solidified some things in the second half. They were able to get some turnovers, some short fields. They scored a lot of points, and it looked like that game got out of hand. But early on in that game, this is a veteran offensive line. Brett Bielema is going to build it, offensive line, defensive line. Defensively, they were okay. But offensive line-wise, I was shocked at how much pressure they were giving up on Drew Altmaier. If they continue to do that through the Big Ten play, Illinois is not going to be anywhere close to where we thought, or at least not where I thought they would be.
Yeah, it's a huge pivot point in the season for both of those teams because, as we saw last year, you can get into the playoff at 11-1 without any marquee non-conference games. At 10-2, if you do have a few quality wins, this would be a quality win for whoever gets it. And what I've seen, Indiana about a field goal favorite. So basically, odds makers have these two teams pretty much dead even on a neutral field this game in Bloomington on Saturday. All right, number 7 on our 7 from 77. And coming up on the audio side, we got Brandon Hillman. On the video side, we'll catch up with Nebraska's play-by-play voice, Kyle Crooks, to preview the matchup. SEC, 2 great games. Georgia surviving at Tennessee. I think it's 9 straight wins for the Dogs over the Volunteers.
Kickers.
Oh, man, yeah. And then Texas A&M wins at Notre Dame late. So the Irish, still ranked, 0-2. They now are likely into the college football playoff for them because they probably have to win out.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you look at their schedule, and quite honestly, they might win out.
Yep.
And they'll get a spot in the college football playoffs because they refuse to get in the conference, and they're Notre Dame. So even if they don't have a marquee win, it's still going to be there. And it's just it's disappointing because they played 2 really good games early in the season, and they played Miami 2 weeks ago. We learned a lot about Miami and that defensive front. You play Texas A&M, and if you just simply take care of the details, you catch a snap, you snap the ball. We talk about that all the time. It's been in my keys to the game. It's about the process. Snap, hold, kick. I mean, at least they go into overtime, or there's a little bit more pressure on Texas A&M. So special teams playing a major part in some of these teams, whether they're 1-1, 0-2, and then that Georgia-Tennessee game. It's very entertaining.
Cool. Yep.
But I think the thing that we take away from that one is that Georgia defense isn't not at all what I thought it would be this year, and it's definitely not the way it was 21-22.
Yeah, 100% agree. Other games of note in the SEC, LSU doubles up Florida, 20-10. Brian Kelly, one public apology as well. Texas slogs its way to a 27-10 win over UTEP. Ole Miss gets a 6-point win at home over Arkansas, 41-35. The intriguing one, we had discussed the potential of South Carolina being a trendy college football playoff type team.
They got the win in week 1 over Virginia Tech. That doesn't look as good anymore. We'll talk about the Hokies momentarily. But Vanderbilt goes to Columbia and just dominates the game. Next 2 for Vandy, Georgia State and Utah State, both at home. So they will likely go into week 5 at 5-0. And then here's their finish. At Alabama, home against LSU, home against Missouri, at Texas, home against Auburn, home against Kentucky, and at Tennessee. All those teams right now, except for Kentucky, are ranked. That is a brutal, brutal stretch. But I think it's fascinating. It starts with the return game for when Vanderbilt kind of got back on the map as they beat Alabama at home. Now they got to go to Tuscaloosa in what will be a very important game for Kalen DeBoer.
Yes, a very important game for him. And, I mean, this is why I talk about, when we talk about in the Big Ten, and I mentioned Drew Altmaier as a quarterback, or I talk about Aiden Childs, obviously we're talking about Bryce Underwood here in Ann Arbor. When you have a quarterback, and they have one at Vandy, and I think his last name is Padilla, you have a quarterback, you have an opportunity to win every game that you're in. And that's what Vanderbilt has built over the last 2 years. They've gotten some confidence with some of those wins last year. Now, can they go on the road and do to Alabama what they did at home? Can they play some of these top-ranked teams, and can they be the Indiana of last year? Now, their schedule will be much tougher than Indiana's of last year, but it's kind of that bottom-level team that's finding a way to play up.
Yeah, Diego Pavia is the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
I can't blame you for not having
all
the Vanderbilt quarterback information, but he is the real deal, and it shows you how unique. We talked about Duke spending big on football for its transfer quarterback. Same deal at Vanderbilt. They kept him, and he might have eligibility next year because of the whole JUCO stuff. He's been like the guy on the lawsuits, so that is something. This weekend, not a whole lot of intrigue in the SEC. Only game of interest from a Michigan standpoint is Oklahoma, their first big test since facing the Wolverines. They host fellow 3-0 Auburn in a game where I think Sooners will be favored, and Auburn trying to show that their early start, they won over Baylor early on in the season, if they're a team that could be a factor in the SEC.
And Oklahoma's quarterback from last year is now at Auburn.
Yes.
And so I know that there's going to be a little bit of there'll be an interesting dynamic coming back to Norman. So it'll just be interesting to see how Oklahoma playing in some of this SEC competition. We know what it looked like, felt like for us. Now it'll get us a chance to see how good is Oklahoma.
ACC-wise, Miami takes care of business live on the CW network, 49-12 over South Florida. That game had a delay as well.
Did we ever confirm
No,
what
but
they went to for their rain delay?
I know. I wish I would have. I'll have to call my local cable provider to add CW. I don't know if I have it. Seriously, I don't know what number it is. But no, I don't know. It'd be a hilarious thing to find out. We did get some more information about from our guy Rob Joyce in the studios on Saturday.
Yeah, what was it? Bridget Jones's Diary.
Correct. Yeah, that was
playing.
That was the play-in into a top 25 clash of college football at 4:30. Anywho, the interesting one from a playoff standpoint, other than Miami looking really, really good, Clemson falls to 1-2. How about that fire drill to get the win? Georgia Tech up to 3-0. Thoughts on that?
I mean, Georgia Tech's always kind of that scrappy team, and they're one of those teams that they seem to have a win like this every single year. I don't know what they do the rest of the year, but I know what they've done to Clemson. Clemson, having already that first initial loss to LSU, was looking at, okay, well, once we get into the ACC and once we start playing some of these conference games, we'll run the table and we'll be fine for the playoffs. Now with 2 losses, I don't know if, and it depends on Florida State, it depends on Miami, it depends on some of these other ACC schools as to what the quality of football will be and their schedule. But, I mean, Clemson, it's going to be a tough road for the rest of the season. And it's surprising because we have already mentioned, like Arizona State, it was surprising that they struggled because they got 17 returning starters. And it was Clemson with 16 and a quarterback in Cade Klubnik that had Heisman buzz before the season. I mean, that's all gone by the wayside. Now it's just a matter of they got to try and get a win every single week.
Yep, they're probably, again, like Notre Dame, into a playoff-like setup where they've got to win out in order to be a playoff team. This weekend, one other thing in the ACC, Brent Pry at Virginia Tech, 0-3. They were down 28-0 at halftime at home against Old Dominion. Virginia Tech's a proud program, great tradition. Be really curious if maybe Shane Beamer is interested in that position after his dad built them to get to a national championship game. But when you have these ACC and Big 12 schools, who we'll talk about briefly in a second, and you don't keep the train rolling, it's going to be really tough for those types of programs to get back into the national conversation, because I think in a lot of ways the ACC and the Big 12 could turn into one bid leagues more times than not.
I mean, honestly, it all comes down to money.
Yeah.
And if they're going to pay enough money on a given year to get whether it's the best recruits or the best transfers, that's really the only path they have to making it a turnaround like we saw at Indiana last year.
Quickly on the Big 12, an escape for Iowa State. They played at Arkansas State, won 24-16. So the Cyclones are 4-0. There are only 6 teams left that are unbeaten overall in the Big 12, including non-conference games. Iowa State, Utah, Houston, Arizona, Texas Tech, BYU, and TCU. Sorry, 7, beg your pardon, did the math wrong. Two of those face off this week. Texas Tech at Utah. Big noon kickoff, big 10 a.m. in the Mountain Time Zone kickoff for Texas Tech at Utah.
Cool.
All right. Come on, where's your Big 12
Kyle
breakdown?
Whittingham, Utah. All right,
Where's
I think
your
that
Big
they could
12
be,
breakdown?
There's not a lot to talk about in the Big 12. You want to talk about a one-bid league. That's where the Big 12 is right now. If you're talking basketball, that's a completely different deal. But, and maybe it's Kyle Whittingham and his experience and his ability to coach a team up. They are one of those teams that's undefeated at this point. But and Texas Tech has spent a lot of money. There's just not a lot of buzz. There's not a lot of great football being played in the Big 12.
Yeah, it's there's parity, but that doesn't quite resonate in a way that you need to right now.
A lot of 6-6 records.
I mean,
hey, you might be paired, but
all right, transition time. On the audio side, John catches up with defensive back Brandon Hillman. On the video side, in about 15 minutes or so, we'll take some of your questions, thoughts on the chat, so get those in. We've already gotten a few good ones. Excited to do that. But we've got a special guest for you, Kyle Crooks, play-by-play voice of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, live from Lincoln. Kyle, can you, I don't know if you heard John's expert Big 12 analysis. Can you provide any extra for us to help piggyback that potential Emmy award or YouTube award?
Well, I just didn't want to waste
efforts?
any time. I wanted to get to Kyle sooner instead of talking about bad football.
Yeah, I mean that's about all I got on the Big 12. It's cool as well. I think this matchup's going to be cooler though. I don't have much on the Big 12. I know a lot more about the Big 10 and coming from the SEC. Obviously, I know a lot there, but the Big 12, that's B2, that's sort of outside my expertise.
Totally get it. Before we get into the actual matchup, and it's a big one coming up Saturday, 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central Time Zone. This is your first year with the Huskers replacing the legendary and unfortunately the late Greg Sharp. What's it been like? Take us through calling a game at, there's a friendly rivalry, especially with John being a 1997 national champion and what Nebraska did that season, but it truly is one of the great places to watch college football.
Yeah, it was unique. My first game was Kansas City on the 9th floor in Arrowhead Stadium against Cincinnati, and replacing a legend is never easy, right? So having to step in for Greg Sharp, who's I've said this in multiple interviews. He's a broadcaster that was built in a lab. His voice is just next level, and the way he was an ambassador for the program was next level. And a lot of fans loved him. Everybody within the athletic department loved him. So it was a really tragic situation. Having to step into something like that obviously was very difficult. But my broadcast teammates have been great. The fans have been great, and this is I feel like a really good time to be around Nebraska athletics and Nebraska football specifically, but I had that first opportunity to call a football game in Arrowhead. First home game experience was a night game, and the last two games have been pretty lopsided. I'm sure you guys have been keeping track of Nebraska in your preparation. So my assumption would be it's going to be a little bit different this week.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm curious as we start to learn more about Nebraska and Matt Rule gets further in his tenure there. What's your impression in your first year of Matt Rule and how he is building this program? He's got his quarterback, but what else does he have around him?
Yeah, I think he's just a guy who's in a really comfortable spot. I mean, you guys know he's a high-profile guy and coach, and he's coming from a situation in Carolina where, look, it didn't go well, and he says it was one of the bigger, I guess, if you want to use the word failures in his professional career, because he had known nothing but success up until that point at Temple, at Baylor, and then getting that NFL opportunity. And now he gets a chance to be at Nebraska where he's embraced the traditions. He's embraced the past. Coach Osborne is around, and the 1995 team's going to be honored this week. The 94 team was honored last year. He embraces all those expectations and what fans expect, and they expect a champion, but he understands there's a lot that goes into being a champion. And like you said, they have all the foundation pieces there. And biggest thing, that's the quarterback. Dylan Raiola, guys, I think has taken a massive jump from year one to year two. How many true freshmen get a chance? And I think it'll be the case at Michigan as well, but a true freshman to get the opportunity to start every single game. And that slowed things down here for him year two. The offense, his ability to check at the line of scrimmage has been massively different. The way things have slowed down, you can see it in his efficiency. And I think just the program as a whole, the confidence space on both sides of the ball, special teams has improved, and his coaching staff is really good around him. So I just think he feels comfortable in who he is and how he runs a program. And I think it's shown in the first three games.
And you mentioned Dylan Raiola. I think the biggest stat that jumps out, again, very early, but 0 interceptions. He had 11 of them last year. It seemed like for every big flash of that high upside 5-star potential that Raiola was last year, it oftentimes came shortly before a big mistake. Where have you seen him take that growth, and how does that play into this matchup against probably the best defense he'll see to this point, and maybe the best defense he'll see all year?
Well, I think the play calling process has changed, right? So Marcus Satterfield, who now is the tight ends coach, was the OC for most of last year, and there were a lot more 5-7-step drops and let it rip when I go back and watch the tape. And now last 4 games of last season and the first full off season for Dana Holgorsen, who I think he's in the best spot he's been in his career, where he doesn't have to deal with the CEO aspect of being a head coach. He can just draw up plays, and he's somebody in Dana who wants to make that simple play over and over again and eventually turn that into explosive plays. And that's what you're seeing in Dylan's progress, is the fact that now he's a lot more mesh concepts, short routes, get the ball 1-2-step drop and let it go, and then let the wide receivers make plays after the catch. He's got a lot more playmakers around him. Dane Key comes from the SEC. He's one of the best receivers in Kentucky football history. Now, Kentucky not necessarily known for their offense, but he's a guy who's a leader and he's going to lead the way in that receiving corps. And Isaiah Hunter is a big-time playmaker they got from Cal. Ja'Cory Barney is a name you'll hear a lot on Saturday. He had one of the best true freshman seasons for a wide receiver a year ago. He comes back for another year. And guys, offensive line-wise in the trenches, this is the best offensive line they've had here in quite some time. So we can talk a lot about Dylan and his progress. And yeah, things have slowed down from an IQ standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. He's taken a massive jump, but everything around him, including the play calling, has taken a massive jump.
The offensive line, I want to ask you about that because it's a very veteran offensive line. And I know they went out and got Rocco Spindler, former Notre Damer. He's a local kid from around here. Dad's a former great player, played in the league for a long time. What have you seen from him? But more specifically, the way that this offensive line has been able to gel to either protect or to gain yards on the ground.
Yeah, there's a lot of expectation in that group. And Rocco Spindler is a big part of it. I think he said in his preseason media availability that, we want to win the award for the best offensive line in the country. And, you could say all these things, but you got to put it into action. And so far, so good. I think the biggest issue, guys, is There's still been a little rotation in the tackle spots. I think you'll see Teddy Prohaska start at right tackle, but we saw Turner Corcoran is a guy who can swing from left to right tackle. So if you look down on the field and you see a different left tackle or a different right tackle, it's something that necessarily isn't out of the ordinary with this team. I don't know if that's something that you want to have moving further and further into Big Ten play. Left tackle has certainly been a rotation. Gunnar Katula's had to start, but they've moved Turner Corker in there. Elijah Pritchard, who was a high-priced offensive lineman from Alabama, he's the third-string guy. So you've had somebody who made 11 starts, some of those under Nick Saban, who's now the third-string left tackle, just sort of shows the depth. But you got a lot of the core of this offensive line is at the guard positions and at the center. I think that's where it's strength. And we know in the Big Ten when it's October, November, especially at Memorial Stadium or in Ann Arbor when those winds are swirling and you need to pick up some short yardage. I think this team is built for Big Ten play late in the year.
Defensively, the last two games, 7 combined points allowed by Akron, or to Akron and Houston Christian. What do you feel like you know about Nebraska's defense through 3 games, and what are some areas that might be stress tests coming up on Saturday?
I think what we do know, Brian, has got to be the secondary is really darn good. John Butler's their DC. He was the DB coach last year, so he took over as the defensive coordinator in the bowl game, and a lot of guys in that secondary went up to Coach Rule and said, John Butler's got to be the guy. When Tony White left for Florida State, and the first 2 years under Matt Rule, this has essentially been a top 25 defense. So the thing for me is, okay, let's maintain the standard to what Nebraska defense has been in the last 2 years. If you can maintain that with the offense to the next step, this is a program that is in a really good spot. I think what we know and what is certain, they have the number 1 pass defense in the country. Now, for Cincinnati, week 1, necessarily pass offense didn't seem like they were in lockstep. They played Akron and Houston Christian. So take that for what it may. Those are 2 offenses that were not in a good spot. So I think we'll learn more about this secondary. It's a very deep group. We'll get Malcolm Hartzog back this week after nickel, who dealt with some injury, but they have 2 of the best corners that you'll find. I think Sierra Wright has been targeted just 4 times in 3 games, so he's probably their best cover guy. Andrew Marshall, they got from Idaho, is another blanket cover guy, and John Butler is somebody who will send a lot of blitzes and trusts his corners and his nickel to cover man-to-man and be on an island on the outside. I think the biggest thing that I'm looking at in this game is in the trenches. Defensive line-wise for Nebraska, I would categorize them as maybe a tad undersized for the Big Ten. So how do they go up against Michigan's offensive line, which I know has dealt with some injuries? I want to see how Elijah Judy, Riley Van Poppel, just a few names for Nebraska on the defensive line, how they can stop the run and fit some of those gaps here against what is going to be an offense. We know what they want to do, and they want to run it down your throat.
Look at the placement of in the trenches that Kyle incorporated there. Great job, well done.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because when I look at Big Ten defensive lines, normally you'll see a lot of guys with 310, 320. And I'm looking at it going, wow, there's one 300-pounder. Maybe you see another one down the depth chart, but everyone is 270, 280, 290. When these guys are in a pass rush situation, are they quicker, even though they may be undersized, maybe they're a little bit quicker than some other defensive lines because it's just how they're built?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're built to get after the quarterback a little bit more. When I talked to Matt Rule, and this sort of got some traction in the preseason at Big Ten Media Days, because this was the biggest concern was the defensive line. They lost Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker to the NFL. Those are 2 big-time defensive linemen. Whenever you lose 2 guys that are playing on Sundays, there's going to be some sort of worry that goes along with that. But you're right. I think there's a lot more overall speed on this defensive line. I think you look at the jack position. The difference maker in this game, guys, a name that I would watch is Dasan McCullough. He's a veteran. He was an All-American at Indiana as a freshman. He was a Sooner last year, and I think he's going to make a massive difference in a game like this. One, being able to hem in a guy like Bryce Underwood, but getting after the quarterback. but it's definitely an overall more team defensive speed than size for sure.
Before we let you go, Kyle, say at the end of the first quarter, what would you be feeling really good about Nebraska's chances if it's been happening, and what would maybe concern you if after the first quarter it's gone a certain way?
I would say the ability to run the ball and move the line of scrimmage and be able to maintain the line of scrimmage defensively. I want to see what that yards per carry looks like after one quarter to see sort of like we'll go back to that backdrop what in the trenches looks like. We're going to bring this full circle with everything. But that would be the biggest number, yards per carry. Okay, what does that look like after one? The turnover margin. Does Dylan have an early mistake? Does this look a little bit different in the first 3 weeks? Is he making different decisions than what we've seen for the first 3 games? Is he continuing to find that high percentage target? What does Emmett Jansen look like in the backfield in the first quarter? How many explosive plays are you going to be able to see here in the first few drives to get the crowd into it? We all know when Memorial's rocking, and I've experienced this over the last couple of weeks, it's a different place to play. Can you get an early lead, have a true freshman quarterback in his first Big Ten start have to play from behind with the crowd now on his shoulders? To me, that's a difference maker. Getting off to a fast start is going to be key for Nebraska.
No doubt. Well, Kyle Crooks, look forward to seeing you this weekend in Lincoln. Appreciate you stopping by, and congrats on year 1 to this point. We do hope you call your first loss on Saturday. We are a little biased, despite your in the trenches usage, but no, man, fired up for you, and wishing you the best. We'll see you this weekend.
I appreciate it, guys. Look forward to seeing you on Saturday. Obviously, I hope for a Nebraska win, but we can always be friendly.
No doubt. Absolutely. Great stuff.
Thanks.
From Kyle Crooks here. I did want to get to some questions and whatnot in the comments, but I do want to mention the fact of what Kyle said toward the end there. And remember the 2 different matchups that Michigan has played at Nebraska during that run of 3 straight Big Ten championships, where really in neither, in both games, Michigan was pretty significantly on paper the better team. You look what happened in 2021, Nebraska hung around, and that game was one of the more nail-biting games for Michigan that entire season. And then 2023, Michigan made sure to enforce early and often, and by the third quarter, fans were leaving the stadium.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a team that is, just like what we're talking with Kyle, like they're going to be physical up front offensively. And they're going to be able to make some plays because they've got a talented quarterback, they've got speed at receiver. And, defensively, this is going to have to be a game for Michigan where they impose their will. And I mentioned it earlier, they seem a little bit undersized. We got that confirmation from Kyle. You're going to have to establish the run, whether it's, with the running backs, whether it's with reverses and Samaj and some other forms, or if it's with Bryce. You're going to have to be able to establish a run, control the tempo of the game so that you don't get into that situation where you're playing from behind and you have a quarterback that is in his second road game. He's a young player, all of those different things that Kyle was talking about. But if you can control the tempo of the game and you take the air out of the ball a little bit, now all of a sudden you dictate what you're doing. That's going to favor Michigan in this game.
Jamie asking in the comments, good morning and go blue. With conference games on the way, which one looks to be a potential trap game? How would you assess that as we see the Big Ten so far through 3 weeks? I don't know if there have been any huge surprises as to what we expected from a team at the start of the year to now, but of that Michigan slate, what do you look to potentially be a trap game for Michigan?
Well, I mean, when you're talking about trap games, I mean, you're talking about games where, okay, well, maybe you're overlooking an opponent because you want to play somebody on the backside of that. I don't think they're overlooking Nebraska to get to Wisconsin. You got USC, Washington. Maybe Washington's a trap game because you're going to be coming back off of that road trip to the West Coast, and now all of a sudden Washington, from what I've seen of Washington, and we know with Jed Fish, they're going to be a well-coached team. They're an explosive team. I could possibly see that. I don't know if anybody's going to get trapped by Purdue coming off of the rivalry game against Michigan State because you're not looking forward to Northwestern or Maryland. I mean, Maryland's kind of always that trap game because they seem to be the team that we play every year before Ohio State. Yeah. But I don't know that the schedule sets itself up for Michigan this year to have a typical quote unquote trap game.
I also do think that trap games are oftentimes looked at as a team that isn't all that great. We'll learn a lot about Washington here a week from Saturday. They will host Ohio State, and I expect Washington will take care of business against Washington State. You never know. Cougs got them last year, so that's by no means locked in. But when you lose by $1 billion at North Texas, you don't feel great about Washington State's chances. But you're right about Maryland. That game before the game always is a little nerve-wracking. LW saying Notre Dame would be mediocre in the Big Ten. They benefit from special treatment. I do think in some years that is the case. Yeah. If let's play this out for a second. If Notre Dame were in the Big Ten, say they join next year, how many times do you think Notre Dame would win the league and make the playoff if they were the 19th team in the Big Ten, and we could add another team to those airport standings that we see? Yeah.
It's a painful thought. I think they would make the playoffs 3 out of 4 years. I think it would help them recruit. I think it would help them in a lot of different ways. And I mean, like right now, and I don't know if Michigan's going to be a playoff team or not. It feels like they're heading in that direction with the schedule. So if you're looking at the Big Ten having, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, am I leaving somebody else out of, the kind of the top of the Big Ten right now? I think they would be that 5th team. And we've talked about in certain years, it's going to be 4 teams for the Big Ten, maybe 5 for the SEC. In other years, it'd be 5 for the Big Ten, 4 for the SEC, or 3, or. So I think, there would be, frequently they would make the Big Ten. I don't know how often they would win it.
Yeah.
Because, winning the conference with the way it's set up, and it could just be as simple as more good teams create more good games. But with more teams, it creates more of a disparity in scheduling. Yep. And if you have a season where an Indiana doesn't play any of those teams, and now all of a sudden you've got a Notre Dame that has to play a Penn State, an Ohio State, a Michigan, and a Penn State all in 1 year, or 2 of those, of the teams I talked about, I don't know. It's really hard to project that.
We also spent a good chunk of the offseason reacting to the latest, we'll call it news, I could call it chaos, that came out from the college football playoff conversation. If these first 3 weeks are any indication, any additional at-large that the SEC or the Big Ten says, here you go ACC, here you go Big 12, we'd love you to have 2 auto bids or 4 or 5 auto bids if you really inflate this to 28, 32 teams or whatever, would be malpractice. We are seeing, as we joked about right before going on with Kyle, the Big 12 is there's some fun games if you care about those teams. There are some really fun games, and there are some programs there that have tradition. But in terms of the grand scheme of college football, there is absolutely no reason to guarantee anything other than auto bids for conference champions for those 2 leagues if you are in the power that the SEC and the Big Ten currently possess.
There's no question. And I'm not a big fan of auto bids for anything. You go out there and you play the games, and this was an off-season conversation, and we don't need to completely rehash it. But I'll ask you this, Brian. In college football right now, who's the dominant team?
That's a great question.
We just don't simply have that dominant team, and maybe it ends up being Penn State. But the questions are, can their coach make the right decisions at the right time? Is it going to be Ohio State 2 years in a row? No one wants to think that, because you've got you're reloading at quarterback. They weren't able to hit the portal. They're not as deep as they have been. They still have the high-end talent. They always will. And then you look around and we thought, well, maybe Georgia. Well, I know that they're undefeated, but they don't seem to have the defense. Tennessee with the quarterback situation and kicker issues. It just doesn't feel like there is a dominant team in this year's college football. And maybe on the back end of that, is it a good thing that we look at it and go, maybe there's 6 teams, maybe 8 teams that could ultimately win the national title?
I think that's best for college football, that is always how it is. Having 2, 3, 4 teams perennially every year, and that might fluctuate, right? Michigan wasn't in that conversation until it was, and things can change. But you want to have some chaos. I'll throw out the team that might be it, and this is coming from me, who said I picked Texas to win the Natty at the start of the year. You picked Notre Dame.
Yeah.
We've joked about
not aging well.
Yeah, we joked about those who picked Clemson and all that. Maybe, even though I said what I said about the ACC, maybe it's Miami. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but if you're asking me right now who has been the most productive, the most impressive in college football so far this season, I think I'd pick Miami. I don't feel great about it.
I'm not necessarily going to argue it, but then you also, you have the same questions about Miami as you really do about Penn State. Penn State is very talented, but are they going to always be held back by coaching decisions? Mario Cristobal, if you want to talk about coaching decisions, that is an area where he really struggles in game clock management. So, I don't know who's going to be that team. And, we don't know much about Oregon right now.
No.
And we didn't even talk about them because we've talked about Ohio State, Penn State. But Oregon may be that team with Dante Moore at quarterback and Dan Lanning, who has proven in a lot of big moments he can make. In fact, they're making rules on coaching decisions that he makes at the end of games. Maybe he's the guy. Maybe that's the program that is, I don't want to say under the radar, but they are after having graduated a quarterback and a number of receivers.
You could give me 10 teams right now and say, yeah, they'll go and win the national championship. And I'd be like, well, I don't believe you, but they could. I'm not sure. Thanks to all those who came out and joined us here today. D-Ray, KTS, Daniel, Thomas, Les. Appreciate Les saying everyone hit the like button. We do encourage you to do that. John, final thoughts here as we wrap up before an audio interview with Brandon Hillman on Wednesday's show, and then getting ready for Michigan and Nebraska from Lincoln, a game that has a little extra oomph for you more than most.
It does, and I'm going to save my emotions. I appreciate you trying to bait me into getting excited on Tuesdays, but that will happen on Thursday. All I am going to say, and I'll be very calm in saying that, is Michigan has to win in the trenches. Defensively, I've got more confidence that can happen. And it's the rotation of defensive tackles. It's Wink using those guys in unique ways. But it really has to do with the emergence of Jay-Sean Barham and his ability to play that edge position, depth at linebacker. I think they'll win in the trenches. Can the offensive line block movement? Can they be consistent? Can they protect Bryce when he needs to be protected? That's going to be the number one question going into this game.
When I think the key is the offensive line, not just John, who thinks that's the key every single week, every single day, every single practice, every single second.
It's a tenet of football.
Yes. It's a tenet of more than 500 episodes of this podcast. It's why the podcast is named In the Trenches. But I agree. Can't wait to break it down the rest of the week. Thanks to John. Thanks to Kyle Crooks from out in Lincoln for joining us. Thanks to all of you who watched, followed along. Stay locked in. Go Blue podcasts with plenty more gearing up for the Big Ten opener. Thanks again for watching, everybody.